Bro thinks he's him. This loser sucker dies like a dog trying to save 2 girls, gets reincarnated, slays dragons, ogres, and my favorite ends up running nobleman politics at age 10. Also, this, whatever the f this is. Yeah, the princesses calls him Daddy Kun. The king hates him for that, so the king executes him, but he reincarnates again because overpowered creatures cannot stay dead. You'll see more of that later. So, 6, 7, or whatever meme you Gen Z freaks are on? Keep watching. The aristocrat's otherworldly adventure, serving gods who go too far. So, Kazuya is just walking home one random day, minding his own business, when a whole crowd suddenly explodes out of a store. 2 girls trip right beside him, and before he can even process that, the thief who caused all this chaos starts waving his knife around and charges straight at them. Kazuya, being allergic to common sense, decides not to run away. He bolts toward the guy and full-on tackles him. He yells at the girls to get out of there, and they do, but then he feels this sharp pain in his stomach and realizes his stomach is leaking. The bandit freaks out and sprints off, leaving Kazuya there doing the classic "so this is death" monologue. While fading out, he's glad the girls are safe, though he kind of wishes he didn't make them cry. His brain starts shutting down, but when he opens his eyes again, he's in some mysterious room. A maid is crying and calling him Cain, which is already confusing, and then a woman with, let's just say, big mom energy, comes in hugging him and asking if he remembers his mother. None of this makes any sense to him, but one glance in the mirror sends him into full panic because that is definitely not his face. After apparently being in a coma for a week, the maid blames his weird reactions on a lingering fever. His mom tells Sylvia to fetch soup, and once they leave, Kazuya, or Cain or whatever he is now, tries to figure out how he got turned into a child. He starts wondering if he got isekai'd like some anime protagonist. This man is onto the genre immediately, so he starts searching the room for any hidden overpowered weapon. No luck. Just the unreasonably legendary doomstick of eternally unending cataclysmic destruction, which is very small and barely poking out at the moment. Don't worry, kid, they say it grows. Sylvia walks in and finds him staring at his small sword, which makes Sylvia think he wet himself, which makes Cain die inside too because he is grieving the loss of his entire manhood. Before Sylvia leaves, Cain questions her enough to finally piece things together. His new name is Cain von Silford. He is 3 years old, and his parents are Garm and Sarah. He has a sister named Ryani. Garm is apparently a Giga Terapeta Omni Chad, who also has a second wife, Maria, who has given birth to Cain's older siblings. Garm is a high-ranking Margrave who commands troops guarding the borders near a monster-infested forest. Cain gets hyped when he hears the word monsters, but even better, he learns there are adventurers who can use magic. Sylvia tells him she will teach him magic when he learns to read, so Cain jumps straight into studying because priorities. Once he realizes magic is real, he decides he is fully committed to living his new life here. His old world had nothing left for him anyway since his parents were already gone and his grandpa had just passed, leaving him completely alone. During dinner, Garm hears that Cain can write and Ryan adds that he can do math too. Sarah thinks her son is a genius. Cain gives credit to Sylvia for being the best maid ever, which makes his parents suspicious because he suddenly turned into a straight-A student overnight. Sylvia proudly brings out the milk she extracted directly from Sarah, which makes Garm think he should have been there instead of those loser trash soldiers. Cain says he just wants to learn about the world so he can become an adventurer, and Garm respects the motivation. To help him grow, Garm lets him read all his magic books but warns that Cain will not be able to use magic until he gets baptized at age 5. Sarah agrees, but meanwhile, little Cain is already cooking up fire magic in his hand. He realizes he can already cast spells and has already achieved every otaku's dream. His second attempt goes terribly and he burns his hand, losing control of the spell. Naturally, he thinks these powers will let him become the strongest edgelord alive. All he needs now is the classic cis-con dynamic to complete the trope. And his sister Rianne conveniently slides into the scene, claiming she knows all his secrets. Her big discovery is that he has been secretly studying the outside world. Cain is relieved because she is adorable and not burdened by excessive brain cells. She starts teaching him everything she knows about the world, including the history of the kingdom and the first adventurer, Yuya. After learning so much, he is impatient for his baptism, but eventually the day arrives. He puts on a new outfit and his family is impressed with how handsome he looks. They travel through town by carriage and Cain finally sees this medieval world in action. Curious about blessings, he asks Rianne to show him her status window. She proudly shows off her stats until she sees the massive Brocon tag and immediately begs him to forget it. Cain acts like he saw nothing. Garm explains how magic protections work, ranked from level 1 to 5, and how the gods assign them to people. They reach the church for Cain's turn. As soon as the priest starts, the pillars representing the gods start glowing like a divine rave, and Cain gets teleported to meet all 7 gods. They greet him by his original name, Kazuya, which makes Cain wonder what the heaven is happening. Zenim, the god of creation, introduces himself looking like a weird Santa Claus. Cain thinks the same way, and Zenim hears it because he can read minds. He explains that Kazuya's death was unexpected. Even if Kazuya had not intervened, the criminal would have fallen and been restrained anyway. Basically, Kazuya died for nothing because he wanted to impress 2 random girls. One goddess apologizes for being harsh, but since he died doing a good deed, they chose to reincarnate him. Cain is not offended because he has magic now and a loving family, which is way better than his old world. Rhino, the god of magic, gives him magic protection because Cain works hard. Zenim gives him protection too. Then the god of war gives him warrior skills. The god of technology upgrades his brain so he can stop simping, and the god of capitalism or commerce grants him judgment and an item box so he can become a wealthy. The god of earth gives him the most ridiculous ability of all, plot development. Zenim laughs at how broken Cain will be and sends him back. The priest sees the statues glowing like never before, so Garm demands to see Cain's status. Cain gets a horrible gut feeling and runs off to the bathroom to check it alone. His fear was correct. Every single protection is level 10, the absolute maximum. He knows he cannot show this, so he uses a special ability called Status Conceal to hide everything. During his birthday dinner that night, his family celebrates with him. Garm asks again to see his status, so Cain displays a safe version. His family is still shocked because he has protections from all 7 gods and over 340,000 magic power. He is 5 years old and already stronger than most mages alive. Garm panics and makes him promise to keep it secret. Cain agrees and goes to bed, noticing a notebook on summoning magic. Since Sylvia will not be around, he decides to try summoning something cute in the backyard. He activates the summoning circle, and instead of a cute pet, a huge monster emerges. Rianne and Parma scream exactly like last time he remembers, but this time Cain promises himself things will end differently. He rushes in to tackle the monster, but the monster smacks him away and crushes his stomach. Even in agony, Cain swears he will not let the people he cares about cry again. He gathers every drop of strength he has left and casts a spell that erases the monster. On the ground, he sees the fluffy cat ears and wishes he could have touched them one last time. He wishes he did not have to make anyone cry again and worries he might die for real. After a few minutes, Cain wakes up and realizes he survived. The people he protected are not crying this time. He realizes that in this world, his powers actually let him save people. Later, during the ceremony for his birthday, Garm asks him what he wants to become in the future. Cain confidently says he wants to travel the world and help people everywhere. To protect everyone's smiles, he will become an adventurer. Hearing the determination in his voice, Garm promises to hire a tutor for him. Back in his room, Cain wondered what kind of tutor he was about to get, and right when he was imagining something completely normal, she finally arrived. He got so excited he sprinted toward the window and accidentally teleported straight outside, landing in the most embarrassingly convenient position imaginable. He apologized to the girl, and the butler introduced his 2 tutors, Millie and Nina. Inside the mansion, Millie was already struggling because she kept getting distracted by the gigantic aura of Garm. She is a fan. Meanwhile, Cain was too busy noticing Nina is an elf. Garm told them they didn't need to be so formal, and Cain asked them to talk to him like he was just a friend. Millie lit up like she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment, and they jumped straight into lessons. In the mansion's training area, Cain showed off his sword skills and nearly made Millie drop her jaw. To figure out what exactly they were dealing with, she requested a mock duel. Cain charged at her immediately, and she barely managed to block his attack. Nina wondered if he had the war god's blessing, and Cain reminded her that he was kind of supposed to keep that part secret. Millie gasped out fast and begged Nina to teach him some magic before his sword ended up somewhere it should not be. Nina explained she had level 3 magic protection, but Cain had already learned all the basics on his own. He showed off his ability to summon magic from every element, and every spell he threw tore through stone like it was cardboard. He casually mentioned that he also had the magic god's protection, which made Millie realize they might actually have nothing left to teach him. Then he casually pulled out a towel from his item box, and both girls realized they were basically decorative at this point. If they tried to train him inside, he'd probably blow the mansion off the map. So Cain suggested they head outside to study. He'd never been outside the grounds anyway, so Millie and Nina figured it was a good idea. They explained everything to Garm, and the moment he heard Cain was strong enough to level the mansion on day 1, he almost had a spiritual awakening. He knew the day would come, but had been hoping Cain would mature a little first. Still, he reluctantly agreed as long as Cain promised never to enter the forest. Cain gave his word, and they stepped out of the mansion grounds for the first time. Nina began by asking Cain to demonstrate intermediate-level magic. He instantly prepared a fire spell and blasted it toward the stone target, knocking the girls off their feet and leaving behind a crater. They wondered if he had drained all his mana, but Cain hadn't even broken a sweat. While he was laughing it off, Millie sensed enemies nearby. A rabbit jumped from the bushes to attack her, but her strike missed. It lunged at Cain, but he easily dodged and shot it down with air bullets. Millie asked if he planned to sell the drops, but Cain wanted to show his family, so he stored it inside his item box. Millie was stunned, since she'd been saving up forever just to afford a magic bag, which was basically the Walmart version of his item box. While she was processing her financial trauma, Nina used her search ability to scan 300 meters for monsters. Cain thought it looked cool and immediately copied the spell, identifying the exact number of 4 rabbits nearby, which shocked Nina because no one should be able to get that precise. Cain ran ahead, and Millie told her to just accept defeat. They took down the rabbits together, but one tried escaping toward the forest. Cain chased it, and Millie yelled at him never to enter the forest because legendary monsters lived there. Every few decades, those monsters tried to break into the city, which was why their walls were so heavily reinforced. Cain understood the danger but secretly wished he could explore it someday. That night, he checked his level and realized he'd already hit level 8 just from a handful of rabbits. He checked his status window and discovered the God-chosen title was giving him 100 times the EXP and 100 times the ability points per level. His power had already overtaken most humans, and he knew if this kept going, the entire country might decide he needed to be removed. A few months later, Millie took him to the Adventurers Guild to fight stronger monsters. Inside, Rudy greeted them and asked what they needed, and Millie explained she wanted quests appropriate for Cain. Before they could continue, some guy walked up and mocked Millie and Nina because they were D-rankers babysitting a child. Since she was a D rank, he told her to ditch the kid so he could show her what a real D looked like. Nina told him to back off, but Cross got annoyed and grabbed her while his lackeys restrained Millie. Right as he tried to reach for Nina's face, Cain gripped his arm and said he wasn't going to let him treat his tutors like that. Millie begged Cain to run, but he told her he needed the training and slapped Cross across the face. Cross got up and went for a punch, but Cain dodged easily and messed up his footwork, casually introducing himself as Cain. Cross didn't care and kept trying to fight. He pulled a knife and lunged with serious speed, but Cain dodged every attack, caught the sword between his fingers, and tossed him like trash. The other two tried holding a knife to Millie, but Cain handled them in seconds and kicked them out as well. Nina hugged him and promised she'd protect him next time, though everyone knew he didn't need that. Years passed, full of training and downtime, and Cain grew into a tall, charming young man. Sylvia told him his final class with his tutors was coming up, and Cain wanted to find a way to thank them. He remembered Millie had always wanted a magic bag, so that night he traveled into the deepest part of the dark forest. A blood ogre appeared, and he took it down. Then he defeated an earth dragon, which was so insane the guards thought a monster rampage had begun for the decade. The entire army mobilized, and Garm led troops into the forest. Cain gathered the materials he needed and teleported away, accidentally leaving his towel behind. When Garm arrived, his subordinate reported that all monsters had already been wiped out. Garm wondered who could be strong enough to do that, then spotted the towel, and every bone in his body screamed. When the final tutoring day arrived, Millie and Nina felt bittersweet about their time together ending. They told him it was his graduation day and praised him for working hard the past 3 years. Cain thanked them from the bottom of his heart and revealed the magic bags he made for them using blood ogre and earth dragon materials. He tried to play it off like they weren't a big deal, just regular bags that could casually hold an entire mansion. Millie freaked out because the most expensive magic bag in existence could only hold 2 carriages worth of items. This thing would be considered a national treasure. She worried people would target them, but Cain explained he enchanted the bags so that if anyone else tried to carry them, the bags would feel as heavy as all the contents combined. Millie and Nina thanked him deeply and dropped to their knees, telling him that when he grows up, If he ever needs anything, he could come to them for any kind of help. Their contract ended at that moment, and Cain felt himself grow a little more, emotionally and otherwise, and honestly, so did I. Months later, deep inside a cave, Cain fought a red dragon and ended it with a single strike. He defeated one of the strongest creatures alive, and when he checked his level, he saw he now had over 80 million magic power and earned the Dragon Slayer title. 2 years passed, and Cain finally turned 10. He would be attending a noble event for his birthday. The journey would take a week as long as monsters didn't interfere, so Cain used his search ability to scan a 3-kilometer radius. He detected monsters ambushing soldiers ahead and told his father they needed to hurry to help. The horses were too slow, so Cain jumped out like Spider-Man and used wind magic to blast himself forward. The soldiers were cornered and moments away from being wiped out, but Cain swooped in and saved one. He flew around slicing monsters apart with air cutters. A few rushed toward the carriage, so he summoned his sword and erased them with one swing before taking on the boss monster. He dodged, launched himself skyward, coated his blade in fire, and ended the beast instantly. A soldier told him to stay away from the carriage, so Cain introduced himself as Garm's son. Then Garm's soldiers arrived and realized they contributed absolutely nothing today. One soldier collapsed from blood loss, so Cain held him and cast healing magic, restoring everyone instantly. Garm finally arrived, saw the destruction, and immediately recognized the crest on the carriage as the royal family's crest. From inside the carriage, 2 girls appear, Celestia, the princess, and Silk, the duke's daughter. They thank Garm for saving them, but he quickly sets the record straight and tells them it was Cain who pulled off the rescue. Celestia looks like she's about to faint, so Cain uses a relaxing spell to calm her down. The light washes away all their stress and fear, and apparently also, this little sucker adds a little extra magic that she definitely didn't ask for. Celestia rushes over to thank him properly, Silk grabs his hand like he's some legendary swordsman she's been waiting for, and then Celestia claims he's hers. Cain is just standing there like an adopted stray cat with 2 rich girls fighting over ownership. Before he can escape, they drag him into their carriage and kidnap him right in front of his dad. Inside their massive carriage, Cain wonders why they are sitting so close to him, but Celestia refuses to let go because she's terrified he'll leave. She asks him to call her Teles, and Silk wants him to call her Silk. His calming spell worked a little too well, and now both of them are officially in charm mode, clinging to him like I cling to my Nico Robin body pillow. The soldier up front announces they're approaching the rest area, and Cain prays this whole situation resets itself somehow, but the girls immediately say they want to rest with him after arriving. At the rest area, Cain tries to escape the mess he stumbled into, but Celestia and Silk tell him they'll be too scared to sleep unless he stays with them. Garm tries to step in, saying the idea is completely inappropriate, but the girls claim they're traumatized and terrified a dragon might attack. Garm says he can handle the dragon, but Silk fires back that he's useless compared to Cain. They beg him to stay with them, so Cain accepts, but only on the condition that the beds are separated as far apart as possible. Garm tells him that having 2 wives seems nice until you realize it means twice the headaches. Inside the bedroom, the girls ignore every boundary he tried to set. They push the beds together and insist he sleeps between them. Then they decide even that isn't close enough and use Cain as a human body pillow all night. That reminds me, I have to wash my Nico Robin body pillow later. Anyways, this little sucker of Giga Chad is 10 years old and has somehow created his own harem by accident, but he has already learned he'd rather be single for the rest of his life. He doesn't get a second of sleep, and after several nights of that, they finally make it to the capital. The head knight greets them, and the girls are still glued to Cain. The knight bows deeply, already aware of how Cain saved everyone from the ambush. For the fallen soldiers, Cain's item box allowed him to carry their bodies back home. A bell rings, and Cain tries to escape the castle, but the knight tells him he has an audience with the king. Inside the inner chamber, every major politician has gathered for Cain's meeting. Cain bows, and the king's count praises him for saving Celestia and Silk from all 50 orcs by himself. To reward him, the king gives him a mansion, 10 platinum coins, and names him a baron. Some politicians start whispering, and then one fat guy waddles in complaining that it's not fair to give a child such wealth. The king tells Cornigo to stop running his mouth unless he wants to stay fat forever. The king says even he wouldn't have been able to save the girls in that situation. The kingdom needs knights like Cain, so his decision stands. Cornigo sulks away. The king asks Cain if he'll accept. With 0 room to decline, Cain accepts politely, but the king isn't finished and wants to speak with him privately. Garm congratulates him on getting his own mansion before his older brothers. The king arrives with the two girls, and Cain knows he absolutely cannot bring up Telestia calling him daddy last night. The knight thanks him for saving his daughter, and the duke expresses gratitude for Cain saving Silk. Then the king gets serious and asks Cain if he would take both of the girls' hands. He won't marry them yet, but they'll wait until he's an adult. After all, he linked arms with them and slept beside two unmarried noble girls. Their reputations are done for, and Cain had better accept before the gods send him divine consequences. This brilliant plan was originally crafted by the count to investigate who Cain really was, but the king was shocked when both girls said they wanted to marry Cain themselves. After hearing of Cain's achievements, the king became determined to keep Cain tied to this kingdom. Cain thinks this is the worst possible situation he's been dragged into. Garm refuses to help him, and the pressure crushes Cain from all sides. With no choice left, he accepts becoming their future husband. Telestia and Silk get emotional, talking about how they'll never forget the nights they spent together, and Cain tries to explain it was just a misunderstanding because of all the positions they did. They ask him what the hell he's talking about, and he desperately clarifies he meant the bed positions. This man cannot catch a break. A few days later, Cain goes to the royal church to meet the gods again. Zenim asks what took him so long, and Cain explains his stats have gotten overwhelming. At his current level, Cain is the strongest human alive, so Zenim asks if he wants to become a demigod. Even then, there would be limits to what Cain could do alone, so Zenim advises him to build strong relationships. Then he asks Cain if he can create entertainment using his knowledge from his past life. Cain thinks he can create the perfect game, and Zenim and the technology god immediately beg him to do it. Later that day, Rianne is shopping for clothes, and Cain is absolutely done with her brocon behavior. He runs off and bumps into Parma, the girl he saved 5 years ago. Her uncle Tamanis introduces himself and is stunned to learn Cain is a noble. Cain tells him not to treat him differently and asks to browse his shop, an antique store where all the items are made by Tamanis. Cain asks if he can place a custom order. Tamanis is curious, so Cain shows him the blueprints for the game he wants to create. Tamanis thinks it's brilliant and agrees to make a prototype. Cain pays him a full gold coin up front. Tamanis tries to refuse something that big, but Cain says to treat it like an investment in their relationship. Tamanis accepts and promises to make the best board possible. Cain leaves but immediately gets ambushed by Rianne, who is ready to kill him for running away. She demands to know why he didn't see all the outfits she tried on, and Cain says she would have looked like trash in all of them anyway. She's delighted her brother called her ugly because she plans to teach him the correct response by forcing him to endure every outfit she owns. Thankfully, Sylvia bursts in and rescues him, telling Cain that Tamanis finished the prototype. The game looks exactly like the one he imagined, and they play it together. Tamanis believes it'll be the next big trend and a guaranteed bestseller. Cain suggests creating a fancy noble version too, since rich people love flexing. They plan to produce 50 noble editions and 1,000 standard ones. Tamanis says Cain is a genius but explains his company can't manufacture that many yet, so Cain slams a pile of gold coins on the table. Tamanis swears he'll produce all the boards as fast as possible before competitors try copying it. They create a bootleg patent by presenting the board to the commerce god, who seals their contract in golden light. Cain asks if they can also create a luxurious version for the royal family. Tamanis is honored that his workshop is considered for something so prestigious, and Parma thinks Cain is amazing for having royal connections. Cain thinks she has no idea. The gods themselves are probably playing the game already. The next day is the debut ceremony, so Garm warns Cain to watch out for parents trying to introduce their daughters to him. Cain says not to worry because he's a Chad and will create the largest harem ever. Inside the castle, Cain spots Cornigo with his kids and figures out that ugliness is in their genes. The Duke arrives with Silk, and his smile sends chills through Cain. He thanks Cain for saving his daughter and says he hopes they'll have a good relationship, and Cain realizes he's probably doomed, but he refuses to back down. Right in front of Silk's own father, Cain looks her dead in the eyes and tells her she's the most beautiful girl in all the lands. He promises he'll never leave her. Silk's dad scoffs and goes, "You're ugly, you're disgusting, I'm gonna kill you, give me $200 and don't charm my daughter in front of me." And Garm refuses to let anyone roast his son like that. He tells the Duke he's actually Silk's real father. Truly a beautiful family moment in this evil world we live in. As they walk off, Cain says he's glad he was born to such a giga-chad, unlike that Cornigo guy with ugly genes. The trumpets blare, and the king makes his dramatic entrance. Cain isn't listening to a word he says because he's too busy staring at the princess like she's the only person in the room. After the speech, Cain greets the king and tells him that he is more majestic than a god and his presence has him choking harder than his daughter. He stops himself before finishing that thought. Then he promises Tellus he'll never leave her, unlike the queen who sleeps more with the royal guards than with the king. He again stops himself before saying that thought. Cain presents the game he developed with Tamanis. The king is intrigued and wants to speak to him after the ceremony. Garm asks when Cain became a business tycoon, and Cain says he needed to secure income to maintain his mansion. Garm is proud because he's always wanted his kids to be more successful than him anyway, but he reminds Cain to make friends his own age. Cain is grateful to have him as his dad. Right then, Silk swoops in to drag him away. They sit together and Silk does everything she can to keep Tellus from getting near him, but Cornigo's kids interrupt. The guy tries flirting with Silk by complimenting her dress, but she refuses to acknowledge his existence. One of his lackeys tells Cain to leave because Habit is having a private moment, but when Cain tries to introduce himself, Habit tells Cain to apologize for interrupting Lady Silk and upsetting her. Cain tells her he'll make Habit apologize first since he's the one being rude. Habit gets furious and challenges Cain to meet him in the parking lot, which doesn't exist, so they settle for a field instead. Silk panics, thinking Cain is going to get destroyed, so she clings to him before the fight even starts. Habit gets jealous and demands the battle begin already, but Silk doesn't care and hugs Cain tighter so he stays beside her. Cornigo's lackeys get angry and start doing a weird rain dance to summon fire? What the f is even that? The next goon thinks he can do it better and whips out a bell to make his version. Silk tells them to stop the circus because Cain is not some random kid. She announces he's a baron, the third son of Margrave Garm, and he saved the princess from 30 orcs. She proudly declares his name like she's presenting a national hero. Habit and his lackeys immediately switch sides, bow to Cain, apologize desperately, and run away like cockroaches. After they scatter, Silk realizes Cain could have revealed his identity at any time, and he only stayed quiet to make them look stupid. She says she'll tell the princess, and Cain begs her not to. She promises to keep it secret if he goes on a date with her. Tellus walks in asking what they're whispering about. Cain stops Silk from talking, but Tellus threatens to tattle on him for being too close to Silk. Silk counters by announcing she's already secured a date with him. Tellus gets jealous and demands a date too. Cain thinks she looks cute, so he agrees. The king suddenly appears behind him and asks what he just said. Tellus proudly repeats it. Cain realizes he's raised a monster, and the king says they're about to have a long man-to-man talk. Cain thinks this is finally the moment he gets executed. But the king spares him this time, thinking he can't execute his daughter's daddy Coon. The next day, Count hands him the keys to his mansion. Then the Duke barges in and asks him for a game of Reversi, and Cain instantly regrets coming back to life. After a week of hiding from the king, Cain is finally ready to see his mansion. It's a rundown mess that hasn't been touched in years. He inspects each room with magic and decides to start cleaning. With one full sweep of his magic, the entire mansion and the whole backyard are restored to brand new condition. Sylvia finally arrives and is thrilled to hear she'll be his personal maid. She even brings a whole harem of maids and a butler to handle all his noble responsibilities. Sylvia tries to get everyone to start cleaning, but they find out the place is spotless already. Cain explains he cleaned the entire mansion with magic, and Colin wonders why no one is even shocked by this boy anymore. Sylvia starts preparing to receive all the gifts and items nobles traditionally send, and Colin tells Cain to head back home. Cain completely forgot his brothers are returning today. At Garm's mansion, his brothers congratulate him for getting his own estate before any of them and say they're proud to have him as their younger brother. Cain shows his family around his new mansion. Garm remembers it being a wreck and asks Cain if he really fixed it. Cain shrugs and says he just remodeled it with a little magic. Sarah is proud she raised such a strong son, unlike the kids from Garm's other wife. Cain gives them a tour, but Garm complains it needs more decoration because nobles show their class with paintings, vases, and mounted monsters. Cain says he has the perfect solution and disappears. When he returns, Sylvia screams, and all the maids panic at the sight of a massive red dragon mounted on the wall. Garm demands to know why his son has a red dragon sitting in his house. Cain calmly explains he defeated it alone. It's a calamity-level monster no one has ever beaten before. Garm is thrilled to have such a powerhouse of a son. A mounted red dragon is worth 10,000 platinum coins, which Cain quickly realizes is about $100 million in his old world. Just then, Sarah screams again, and they rush to the bathroom. She asks what the toilet is because it's made her feel better than Garm ever has. Garm, thinking she's exaggerating, goes to check it out himself. After experiencing it, he realizes he's been missing out his whole life and thinks it'll impress visitors. Cain wonders why he'd ever invite people over. Garm explains that nobles must host a debut party when they claim a mansion, which means inviting every noble. He hates it, but it's mandatory. Colin has already prepared a guest list to help. As Cain looks it over, he notices Cornigo is on the list and wishes he never had to see him again. The only one missing is the king, since only counts and higher can invite royalty. Cain suddenly realizes he has no idea what kind of gifts he's supposed to prepare for the debut party. He doesn't know what nobles want, what they expect, or what he should even pretend to offer. Sylvia suggests he make his own gifts and put his personal twist on hospitality, and that finally sparks an idea. Using magic, he crafts a glass cup, since porcelain is the only tableware anyone uses in this world. For food, he decides he's serving hamburgers, and Sylvia takes one bite and looks like she's just discovered the meaning of life. For the drink, he pours her carbonated wine. She takes a sip, loves it, but also acts confused, then immediately asks for another glass, then another, and another. She basically drinks the entire stock before Colin arrives and tells Cain the king has requested his presence. The king is furious and demands to know why he didn't receive an invitation to the debut party. He slams his desk and reminds Cain that he's the one who gifted him the mansion. Then the Duke strolls in flashing his invitation, bragging that Silk clearly outranks the princess. The king looks ready to cry and tells Cain he's disappointed in how he treats his future father-in-law. Cain tries telling the truth, that he literally never had a chance to hand it to him because the king is always busy, so he hand-delivered it today. The king takes the invitation, shows it off like a middle schooler who just got a love letter, and tells Cain that Tellus will be attending. The night of the debut party arrives and everyone enters Cain's mansion. The Duke shows up with Silk, and Cain calls her the most beautiful woman in the world. When they see his massive red dragon statue, Silk looks like she cannot wait to move in. Colin reminds Cain it's time for his speech, and Cain thanks everyone for coming and hopes his small offering will please them. He raises his drink for a toast. His parents try it, love the fizzy taste, and even the glasses leave them shocked because they look like treasures. Cain tells them he crafted the cups himself and that they're gifts to take home. The king arrives and immediately spots the sparkling drink waiting for him. One sip and the fizz practically sends him to heaven. He tries the hamburger next, and after biting into the meat and cheese, he looks like he's listening to a choir of angels. Tellus is enjoying Cain's meat too, I mean the meat in the hamburger that Cain cooked. The queen suddenly screams that she just experienced a different kind of climax and begs Cain to install the same sprayer in the royal bathroom. The king goes to check what she means and ends up letting out a scream so loud the whole mansion hears it. He comes back pretending nothing happened but scolds Cain for hiding such a divine device from him. Cain promises to install one immediately. The king praises the food, the drink, the decor, everything, chanting that this is peak hospitality. The entire crowd applauds and Cain finally feels proud of all his efforts. Then Colin pulls him aside and says, "Trouble is coming." Cornigo barges in calling Cain's mansion a doghouse, so Cain stops Colin from warning him about the statue. Cornigo sees the red dragon and screams like he's being murdered. Cain apologizes, saying he didn't mean to scare him with such an expensive decor piece. Cornigo tries to brush it off and calls Cain's taste awful, but everyone else is disgusted that he dared to speak like that right after the king. At the dining table, Sylvia offers him carbonated wine. Cornigo says it looks disgusting but gulps it down like water. Cain gives him a hamburger and he calls it trash but eats every crumb. The nobles notice how horribly he's treating Cain. Colin quietly advises Cain to stay calm, which sparks a brilliant idea. Cain brings Cornigo a set of glass cups and says they're just modest gifts. Cornigo says they look cheap but demands every single one plus the hamburger recipe. Cain says no, they're gifts for everyone. Cornigo throws a tantrum demanding 100 glasses immediately. Cain pretends to stall as a certain red object approaches. He says he's willing to give the kingdom's greatest item, better than any jewel. Cornigo gets excited and orders him to hand it over. Then the king appears behind him. Cornigo freezes. He asks the king why he's in such a lowly home. The king erupts, saying Cain saved his daughter. The Duke asks if Cornigo came after the king, which destroys whatever lie Cornigo was preparing. The king threatens to strip him of his rank if he keeps disrespecting Cain. Cornigo tries to worm his way out by saying he was impressed by the party, but the king tells him to start acting like a real noble and commands him to leave. Silk tells Cain she knows he planned this perfectly. The Duke asks if he used them as bait, and Cain gives the most innocent face he can manage. A week later, Cain is out walking when Captain Dime approaches him. He was sent by the Prime Minister to deliver monster materials, so he leads Cain to the storage room. Cain thinks the room is way too small. Dime panics and asks if all of Cain's monsters are as big as the red dragon in his mansion. Cain says no, just the legendary earth dragon that even elite adventurers couldn't defeat. Dime is stunned, but tells Cain to drop the monsters in the field instead. Cain opens his item box and releases all the materials. Seeing the haul, Dime asks if Cain is a hero or a disciple of the gods, making Cain internally panic. Cain tries to leave, but Dime asks if he wants to train with the knights and meet their leader. Cain realizes he's in trouble again. This is how Cain ended up facing the entire army. Dime introduced him to the soldiers and told them they'd be dueling him. One soldier asked if they should really be fighting a 10-year-old. Since he was so cocky, Dime suggested he go first. The soldier offered Cain the first move, and Cain happily accepted. In one instant, he activated Boost, vanished, and defeated the man with a single slash. Cain tried to leave again, but Dime insisted he fight all of them at once, and that's how he got trapped in this situation. Just when Cain was about to get dogpiled by hundreds of knights, their leader shouted for everyone to stop. They were about to attack a child. She hugged Cain to comfort him, and Cain was shocked because she's an elf. She asked Dime why he was putting a child through this, and Dime explained Cain was the one who saved the princess from 30 orcs alone. She finally understood and asked Cain to duel her with an aura that could kill a god. Every soldier assumed Cain lived a great 10 years and wished him a peaceful afterlife. Cain asked why she was holding a real sword, and she said it made the duel more fun. She rushed at him with impossible agility. He fought back, but she danced around his strikes. She boosted her own power and they clashed, their speed leaving the soldiers stunned. Cain tried creating openings, but her defense was airtight. He activated Clock Up, sprinted in, vanished from sight, and reappeared behind her with his sword at her throat. He declared the duel over. She immediately experiences the greatest climax of her life, hugs him, and announces she's marrying him. Cain tells her he's known her for less than 10 minutes. She admits that's true. She introduces herself as Tefana, daughter of a duke, and assures him that even if she's older, elves can live 300 years so she'll look young forever. Cain runs away from this walking bright red flag and says she needs her father's approval first. She tells him that's not a problem because her family doesn't want her home unless she gets a spouse. Cain says absolutely not because he needs the entire army's permission first. He turns to Dime for backup, but Dime has fallen asleep. The leader decides she's going to the king to sort everything out and drags Cain with her. Cain thinks this is the worst outcome possible, and Dime hauls him into the castle. Inside, the king wonders why Cain is back already. Tefana steps forward, her voice suddenly sweet and terrifying, and announces they're getting married. The king demands an explanation. Cain tries to clarify that he beat her with his wooden stick so hard and penetrated deep into her defenses, which apparently leads to this situation. The other girls haven't even heard about this whole elf-princess wedding proposal situation, but that isn't even the main problem. Garm explains that Tefana isn't just the leader of the army, she's from a kingdom full of elves and is basically their princess. The king gently tries to break the news to her that Cain is already engaged to his own daughter and to the duke's daughter too. Tefana freezes, then processes all of it and somehow decides this only makes Cain even more desirable. Everyone quietly wonders what kind of copium she's breathing because they want some of that. The king says they can only discuss marriage after she gets her father's permission. Tefana happily agrees and tells Cain to come with her. He asks where, and she says they're going to deepen their love by battling with sticks. The king wants to know how the strongest knight in the kingdom lost to Cain, so he asks Garm if he knows anything. Garm knows nothing, but Dime remembers Cain panicking when gods were mentioned, so the king grows suspicious. The count suggests they test him by showing him that mythical book. Meanwhile, Cain is wandering around like a ghost after a week of non-stop training. He hears Tijuana calling for him and tries to run, but Dime grabs him and drags him to the king's room yet again. The king asks Cain why he looks so miserable, and Cain tells him he's sick of seeing his ugly face. The king says he brought him here to show him something. The count takes out the book, an emperor-level magic text passed down from the first king, Yuya. Cain asks if he can read it, and the king gives permission. Cain opens the book, reads a little, and realizes he knows all these spells. He's actually relieved to finally learn how to cast some of them properly. The king stares in disbelief. He explains that the writing in that book is unreadable to everyone else. Cain checks again and realizes what language it is. The king explains that it was written by the first king in Japanese. Cain thinks everything finally makes sense because the first king must have been reincarnated like him. The king adds that no one has ever been able to read it until today. He tells Cain to explain who he really is. Cain knows he can't hide it anymore and decides to trust them. He makes the king promise to keep everything secret, or Cain will have to leave the kingdom. Once the king agrees, Cain tells them the truth. He has memories of a previous life. He lived in the same land as the first king Japan. He apologizes for hiding it. Garm asks if Cain is really his child. Cain confirms the gods told him Garm was his father when he turned 5. The whole room freaks out hearing that Cain has actually met the gods, and Cain casually says they're all nutcases, but he sees them all the time. Garm asks to see his real status, and the room loses its mind when they see superhuman stats everywhere. The king has no idea what to do. Cain's God-chosen title means he's basically the peak of humanity, someone even kings should bow to. Cain begs him to stop panicking because he doesn't want that. Even if he has his past life memories, this is the life he always wanted. He finally has a family, overwhelming power, and people who care about him. He thanks his father for raising him and apologizes to the king for the secrecy. He just wants them to treat him the same. The king accepts this with humility and says they'll treat him like always. Then he immediately wonders if Cain should just be the king instead. Right then, Tifana barges in, waving her father's consent to marry Cain. Here comes another addition to the harem. She drags him away like it's settled. The duke tells the king not to worry because Cain will always be himself, and the king agrees they can trust him. He orders everyone to keep this a secret and says his only wish is for Cain to protect the kingdom, his family, his fiancés, and anyone else who needs him. In the years that follow, Cain starts reading Yuya's book. It says that if he can read it, then he's from the same homeland, Japan. It contains everything about Yuya's life, including how he got isekai'd by Truck-kun. Unlike Cain, Yuya wasn't reborn, he was summoned. As Cain continues reading, Silk and Tellus walk in and assume he's studying for the academy exams. They offer to study with him, but Cain tells them he doesn't have time for their nonsense today. They ask about tomorrow, and he tells them maybe some other time and bolts. Walking down the hall, the third lunatic in his life, Tifana, runs toward him asking to train, and he tells her some other time too. He apologizes while sprinting away because today is special, his 12th birthday. It's the day he can finally register as an adventurer. Inside the guild, he bumps into a red-haired guy who warns him to be careful. Cain wonders where he's seen that hair before, but goes to the receptionist. She asks if he wants to register. He fills out the form, conceals his barren status since it doesn't matter for adventuring, and hands it over. She asks him to prick his finger for the blood test, then gives him his G-rank card. Cain remembers his tutors were D-rank and wonders how they're doing. The receptionist introduces herself as Riita, but 3 idiots walk up and tell her to ditch the G-rank brat and let them explore her G-spot. Instead, their leader tries kicking Cain, but slips instead. His 2 lackeys charge at Cain, but they slam into each other like the clowns they are. Right then, the red-haired guy steps in and says if the man wants to fight someone, he can fight him all night. The goons instantly recognize Claude and run for their lives. Cain thanks Claude for the help, but Claude can tell Cain didn't even need it. He invites Cain for a drink. Since Cain is 12, he gets fruit juice instead. Claude asks how he pulled off those moves, and Cain says he trained with 2 tutors as a kid. Claude freezes, wondering why that sounds familiar. Then he raises a toast for Cain becoming an adventurer. Cain asks why people call Claude Ice Flame. Claude explains that's the name of his party. He uses a fire sword and his wife uses ice magic. Because they trust each other, they take big quests and rank up fast. Cain is impressed by Claude's gold card. A rank, but Claude says it's nothing compared to the first king, who had triple S. Then a wand smacks Claude in the head and his wife Lena appears asking him, "Are we being a bad boy again? Because mommy can teach you a lesson later." Apparently, they have their own kinks. We are not to judge. Cain tries to introduce himself and explains Claude helped him. Lena thinks he's adorable and promises to deal with any guys who bother him, but Claude admits Cain almost turned that guild into a crime scene before he stopped him. Lena whacks him again and says she'll turn him into a crime scene if he doesn't stop being a naughty boy, then drags him away by the ear. Cain assumes this man died sometime after that. Apparently Cain is still too young to understand things like that. Cain tries to figure out his first quest as a G rank. Transporting items would be easy with his item box, but that sounds boring. He spots a quest to defeat as many goblins as possible with no limit on rewards, so he takes it immediately. He runs out of the guild only for Tifana to sprint after him. Finally finding him, Tifana asked what he'd been up to, and Cain admitted it was his first real adventure of the day. Immediately, Tifana dropped everything. Apparently, the world could wait. Cain tried to bolt, but she grabbed him before he could escape, and by the next moment, he had vanished from the neighborhood, presumably forever. Deep in the forest, Tifana gushed about finally having some alone time with her husband, dragging Cain along while pondering aloud where the goblins might be hiding. Cain quietly activated his search skill and spotted them ahead. Without missing a beat, Tifana declared she'd charge in. Whatever she'd been taking that morning was stronger than any common copium, and Cain was starting to think he needed a dose himself. They arrived just in time to teleport in and rescue a civilian under attack. Cain cast a healing spell, and Tifana barreled forward, cutting down 3 goblins in her path. A larger pack closed in, so Cain enchanted her physique to enhance her strength. She acknowledged it in her blunt, unapologetic way before charging headlong into the fray. She vowed to stand by his side in sickness or in health, and demanded his blade for their first joint task. Cain quietly reflected that his life had an uncanny talent for surrounding him with absolute lunatics. When more green lizards appeared, Cain told her he'd handle them while she escorted the rescued civilian to safety. He summoned a light sphere and an ice pillar, obliterating the lizards with surgical precision. Tifana, in classic over-the-top fashion, declared she was married to the best husband in the world. Later, Millie and Nina arrived, staring at the massive crater left behind. At the guild, Cain reported the lizard slaughter, fretting about whether he could claim rewards since he technically hadn't taken the quest. Ryuta was skeptical, pointing out that killing a small group was only C-rank work. Cain casually mentioned he'd taken out roughly 30, prompting Ryuta to rush to the chief with the news. Cedric introduced himself, immediately accusing Cain of cheating. A commoner kid supposedly G-rank on his first outing? Impossible! Cain insisted he had done it honestly. Cedric ranted, claiming the boy was trying to scam the guild, threatening to strip his card. Just then, the guild master arrived. After listening, he calmly told Cedric he had much to learn. Before Cain could process this, Tifana burst into the hall, yelling about how happy she was to see her husband. Cain quickly shushed her. Their engagement was supposed to be a secret, and pushed her aside to ask what she was doing. She explained she came to warn the guild about orcs and lizards. The guildmaster revealed he already knew her family, connected to a baron who had rescued the princess and Silk from orcs. Then the bomb dropped. Cain was Margrave Garm's son, and if he married Tifana, they'd be brothers-in-law. Cain froze. Tifana's brother, the guildmaster, told Cedric to stop insulting his future kin. Cedric instantly groveled, and Tifana dryly noted that a commoner insulting a noble would normally warrant a hanging. Cain promised never to stoop so low and accepted Cedric's apology. The guildmaster decreed the lizard slayings would count as proof, though Cain wouldn't stay at G-rank. Instead, as a gesture, he was promoted immediately to C-rank. Tifana scoffed, too little for someone who had already beaten a red dragon and bested her in duels, and her brother, knowing her capabilities, agreed, ordering Ryuta and Cedric to handle the paperwork and apologizing for their rudeness while thanking Cain for dealing with his sister's antics. Tifana gleefully bragged about completing Love's first joint task, which invited inevitable misunderstandings, but Cain silently thanked anyone else sharing a shred of common sense. Meanwhile, the gods gossiped that Cain never changed. The god of magic wondered why Zenom had doubled his protections, and Zenom explained Cain needed to grow even stronger. Aaron's seal would break soon, after 300 years, and the world would face peril, so Cain required special training under a mysterious master. On exam day, Cain overslept. Sylvia panicked for not waking him, offering breakfast as consolation, but Cain teleported to the site, complaining he only wanted mommy milkers and wondering why Tellys and Silk weren't there. The written test was a joke. Cain, armed with knowledge from his past life, finished in 30 minutes and promptly napped. For the magic assessment, students were told to cast their strongest spell within a protective barrier. Others launched fireballs, while Cain, unable to use his ultimate inferno, produced a blue fireball. Cain's orb obliterated the training field for kilometers, even within the barrier. The instructor rushed to check everyone's safety and switched them to swordsmanship next. Cain noticed Claude, who decided to spar, ostensibly to gauge his strength. Cain activated his boost, and the duel erupted into a high-speed exchange. Cain parried every attack, begging Claude to slow down because normal students would have been wrecked. Claude, enjoying himself, sped up anyway. Cain worried he might accidentally break bones, and the instructor halted them when kids began urinating in fear. Claude admitted he had overdone it and promised a rematch while the exam concluded and students waited for results. Back home, Sylvia asked if he wanted celebratory milk. Cain, hiding the chaos, claimed the exam went fine. Sylvia, disappointed, melodramatically stormed off in tears. Inside the castle, the king demanded Cain explain himself. Cain ranted about being tired of the stinky exam room and muttered threats about using emperor-level magic if the king kept meddling. The king snapped at him to be quiet, asking where he took the exam. Cain explained he came through the south gate and hadn't seen Tellys or Silk. The king pointed out the academy had two entrances, nobles used the north, commoners in the south. Cain realized he'd messed up, was scolded for his nonsense, and the king lamented that Garm should have raised him better. Meanwhile, the teacher reported the incident to the Duke, and everyone laughed. Cain's antics guaranteed he was in for trouble yet again. When the repair bill finally landed on Cain's lap, he suddenly regretted every harsh word he'd thrown around earlier. Results day came, and Cain eagerly searched for his ranking. Oddly, it wasn't anywhere in sight. Panic began to creep in until Silk burst through the crowd like a caffeinated Sprite, practically bouncing, and congratulated him for topping the class. With Tellys out of the picture, Cain figured the coast was clear. At the entrance gate, Cain's sister spotted him and sprinted over. She hugged him so tight, Cain almost forgot how to breathe, and he silently considered investing in bubble wrap armor for future encounters. Meanwhile, Sylvia was having a crisis of her own, fretting over whether anyone would ever want the maid milk she had to offer. Cain finally arrived, and she eagerly asked if he wanted some. Cain, being Cain, mentally noted he might need therapy after this encounter. His words briefly crushed her, but she masked it, hugging him and congratulating him anyway, determined to celebrate properly by producing the best milk for him that very night. Cain couldn't help thinking, what exactly is wrong with this post-menopausal woman? During the ceremony, Cain waved at the best mommy milker lineup in the kingdom, feeling inexplicably rejuvenated, or at least that's what he told himself. With a roguish grin, he invited Tellys and Silk to study with him over the years, promising to call them beautiful in front of their fathers again, which secretly thrilled the girls. As the ceremony kicked off, the teacher called Cain to the stand, and, as expected, he admitted to mixing up entrances and taking the commoner exam, spinning it with flair because of course he would. He claimed that, unlike the current spineless king, everyone should study and make friends equally, bloodline aside. Garme, secretly proud, smiled, ready to twist any situation just like his son. The king overheard Cain's speech and promptly bullied him in front of everyone, sarcastically congratulating the students for being accepted and hinting they wouldn't end up as useless as the wimpy Cain. The girls and the Duke exchanged gleeful glances. Finally, Cain was getting a taste of his own medicine. The first class was about to begin, and Cain was running late after spending an hour crying in the bathroom earlier, which he blamed on emotional exhaustion. The teacher introduced herself and asked students to think about their future. Cain, naturally, envisioned a free adventurer's life, and the girls lit up at the thought of accompanying him. Tellys declared she'd study internal affairs to manage his future kingdom, while Silk wanted to study commerce to assist in his domain. Cain internally sighed, noting that his life was slowly becoming a literal harem management simulation. After class, Cain witnessed Parma being bullied by Habit and his goons for being a commoner, who demanded she drop out immediately. Cain, ever the knight in shining armor type, intervened, demanding respect for everyone. Habit and his cronies froze when they realized it was Baron Cain himself, and he made it clear Parma's status didn't matter, she was his friend. Habit tried to threaten him, but Silk and Tellys quickly put them in their place, sending the bullies scuttling off like cockroaches under a slipper. Cain apologized to Parma and asked to pet her cat ears, but Silk reminded him to behave, and he complied, though part of him thought maybe divorce would be easier than surviving these school trips. A mysterious voice interrupted his thoughts, inviting him for a chat. Cain followed it to the library, where he was suddenly teleported to another dimension. The man offered him coffee, and Cain blinked, wondering how anyone in this place even knew what coffee was. The man introduced himself as Yuya, the first king of the land, also known as the god of creation. Cain's brain performed a full backflip. Yuya had created Favnal, the world Cain now inhabited, and yet somehow Cain had been summoned to do homework? Yuya explained that Cain's previous life would be relevant, and that a powerful evil god named Eren, sealed away 300 years ago, was beginning to stir. Yuya couldn't intervene, so Cain's strength and skill were the only things standing between Eren and chaos. To prepare, he needed to reach level 600, Cain was currently level 300. Yuya promised guidance if Cain completed the task, then vanished, leaving him with only a magical compass pointing back to his mansion. Time flowed differently here. 1 year equaled a single day in his own world, which Cain silently calculated was a cruel trick to speed up his training. No choice left, Cain plunged into the forest. Within minutes, he had dodged attacks from a serpent, slain a giant bear, and faced countless S-ranked beasts. Exhaustion crept in after 4 months of relentless survival with almost no sleep, his mind fraying like old parchment. Amidst the chaos, he heard a puppy whimper. Approaching carefully, he found it injured and instinctively lifted his sword to put it out of its misery, but the look in the puppy's eyes mirrored the sorrow he had seen on human faces before. He dropped the sword, whispered an apology, and hugged it, pouring all his healing magic into it until he passed out. Hours later, he awoke to find the puppy standing guard over him, fending off predators while he slept. Cain realized with a mixture of relief and awe that this tiny creature had been trying to protect him all along, a guardian much smaller than his usual problems, yet somehow infinitely more trustworthy. Without overthinking, he asked if it wanted to travel with him and gave it a name, Haku. Somehow, having this small companion made everything bearable. No matter how brutal or lonely the road got, now there was someone depending on him, and that responsibility kept him moving forward. Cain reached Yuya's mansion. Yuya's eyes widened slightly at the sight of him. 4 years had passed, and Cain had grown noticeably bigger, stronger, and more imposing. Beside Yuya stood a Fenrir, radiating power like it had just walked out of a legendary creature catalog. "Legendary holy beast," Yuya said casually, as if that explained everything. Cain's heart raced. If he could earn its trust fully, he might summon it at will. He tested it, and Haku disappeared into thin air, the magic working perfectly. Cain's training wasn't over. He would now practice under Darren, a master he had yet to meet. Great, he thought, more people to hit me with reality checks. Cain's excitement surged. A new master meant new skills, but first, he had burning questions about Eren and his previous life. At the training site, Darren didn't sugarcoat anything. "You're not strong enough yet," she said bluntly, sounding like the kind of person who might also judge someone for overcooked ramen. When he woke, the ceiling above was unfamiliar, but Haku was right there. Slowly, Cain descended the stairs and encountered a striking elf girl introducing herself as Ruri. She promised to prepare a meal for him, which immediately perked him up. Just then, a baby dragon sneezed, causing Cain to rush over, but Haku, jealous of the little dragon's attention, leapt onto him. "Why do I feel like I've seen this exact scenario before?" Ruri had finished cooking, and Cain took a bite, savoring flavors he hadn't enjoyed in years. Darren encouraged him to eat his fill, while Ruri cheekily offered some elf milkers as well. Back in his original world, Silk sighed, feeling melancholic, but Teles reassured her that Cain would be fine. Sylvia, impatient, insisted they hurry or else Cain would end up only experiencing her milkers. Cain internally agreed that surviving these people required both physical skill and tactical evasion. Months of relentless training ensued. Cain endured countless beatings. A year passed, and though he was still being pounded relentlessly, his determination to stop Eren kept him moving. He remembered the day Ygr had unveiled the truth about his past life. Eren, once the god of amusement, the 8th god of Zenem's world, had forced everyone into a deadly game of death using the Oracle. The gods had begged Cain to make a game for them because the world had grown unbearably dull. Yuya had one more revelation. Cain's inability to protect his friends in his past life had tied him directly to Eren. Those friends were actually his reincarnated parents, reborn in this new world to help bring peace. Cain's mind reeled as Yuya recounted their final battle, his mother casting Inferno, his father and Yuya slashing at Eren, managing only a scratch, and then Cain's father sacrificing himself with overload to restrain Eren. The parents' last words, apologies to their son, etched a single purpose into Cain's heart. He would protect those he loved and forge a peaceful world. And maybe finally get some rest, he thought wryly. Harnessing all his power, Cain unleashed Overload one last time, finally defeating Dareen and completing his training. Overwhelmed, he ran to his parents' graves, expressing gratitude for their sacrifices. Yuya revealed that even during preparations for the final battle, they had always sought ways to reconnect with him. Cain thanked them for their unwavering care and also expressed gratitude to Yuya for looking after his parents. Yuya reminded him that the work had been Cain's own, all he did was guide him. Cain silently wondered if Yuya had ever considered handing out speed boosts like energy drinks. Returning to his old world, Cain was transformed. Yuya cast a spell to restore his original form, and Haku remained by his side. Yuya handed Cain a gift for the current king, and Darren mused that one day he would surpass them both, but Yuya knew it wouldn't be long. Cain had too much to protect and a legion of allies standing behind him. Back in his original world, Sylvia barreled toward him with her maid milkers. Teles and Silk, however, were the ones he'd truly missed, and they welcomed him back warmly, offering cookies they had prepared. Cain cried quietly as he ate, overwhelmed by the homecoming, and also by the fact that he'd never underestimate a cookie hug again. Meanwhile, the king read the letter left by the first king, Yuya, and was shocked. Yuya had crafted a separate world and lived as its god of creation, and had even entrusted Cain with a legendary katana that had slain the Black Dragon. Great, Cain thought, now I need a proper sword rack. The king, convinced of Cain's story, questioned the training Yuya mentioned. Cain explained with a wry grin that the training had been grueling, just like the spears his wife wrestled from other men nightly. For 5 relentless years, he had fought monsters and survived near-death battles every single day. The king blinked, baffled, asking how that could be possible since Cain still appeared small and ugly. The Duke reminded Cain that he had forgotten to accept the A-rank advancement quest, and if he didn't act, his registration would be cancelled. At the guild headquarters, Cain apologized for the delay. He'd been too busy surviving to handle paperwork. The guildmaster reminded him that Tefana's bottled-up love might explode if he kept ignoring her, but Cain was only concerned with his adventurer license. The conditions for A rank were simple: subjugate the 10 bandits terrorizing the route from Gratia to the royal capital. Cain, being the strongest in the city, accepted without hesitation, silently adding, "And maybe I'll get a spa day afterward." Flying through the forest, Cain spotted the ambushed carriage. Descending rapidly, he noticed Nina, Sabino, and Millie among the passengers. One had been gravely injured, and Cain immediately healed her wounds, muttering something about bad bandit hygiene. The bandits sneered, assuming a child couldn't oppose them, but Cain smiled coldly. Activating his boost ability, he struck with his new katana, knocking them off balance and obliterating their cores one by one. Sabino thanked him, while Millie was flabbergasted. Cain showed them his adventurer card, already a higher rank than they were, explaining his guild C-rank subjugation quest, and silently wondered if there was a Best Big Kid award he could cash in. Driving through the capital, the residents recoiled at the sight of the captured bandits, imagining the horrors they'd inflicted. Arriving at Sabino's home, Parma emerged, stunned to see the prisoners. Her father explained Cain's heroics, and Parma couldn't help but think he was the coolest baron ever. Millie's jaw practically hit the floor. Cain had officially become a baron, and she couldn't wrap her head around having to treat him differently now. Meanwhile, Nina grinned like a mischief maker, whispering that Cain had basically turned into every gold digger's ultimate dream, and Millie, ever curious, decided it was time to unlock a new type of milkers for him, the legendary Tudor milkers. But he shoved that aside and bolted to report to the guild, leaving the delights behind. At the guild, Cain handed Rita the testimony confirming the bandits' defeat. As she congratulated him, he tried to grab Millie to show his excitement, but his hand froze mid-air. The bandit from before tried to act tough but collapsed instantly under Cain's overwhelming aura, like an NPC in a game realizing the player had maxed out stats. Claude appeared from behind, and Cain ran to greet him. "Congrats on driving those creeps away," Claude said. Cain shrugged. "I'd do anything to protect my friends." Claude blinked. "Friends?" And then he noticed Millie and Nina standing there. Curiosity got the better of Cain. Wait, Claude revealed the shocking truth. Millie was his sister. The tutors had been guiding Cain since he was 5. Claude thought this was the perfect moment for a celebratory toast of PG apple cider vinegar, and everyone joined in. Millie retold the tale of how Cain had saved them from bandits, and Nina added that he was already A rank. Claude nearly choked. Cain had somehow caught up to him so fast. Millie was stunned too. Her brother was the only one to reach A rank using purely sword skills. It was basically like watching someone beat Dark Souls on their first try. Nina shrugged. "It makes sense. He's a baron with his own mansion now. Every gold digger's dream." Claude gasped, flustered, begging Cain not to charge him for previous rudeness. Cain stumbled, trying not to spill the secret that gods had trained him, like accidentally leaking the cheat codes to life itself. But Millie shrugged it off anyway. After all, he'd killed a red dragon as a kid. Millie and Nina pulled out their magic bags. Rihanna gawked. "How much can those even hold?" Millie laughed. "Never filled mine all the way." Curious, she asked Cain about his own bags. Nina casually revealed they could hold an entire mansion. Rihanna nearly lost it, begging Cain to make her one. He promised, and she promptly passed out. Claude chuckled, reassuring her she wouldn't remember any of it tomorrow. Cain relaxed slightly, but then panicked. He had school tomorrow, and had skipped all of last week. Classic procrastination meets godlike power scenario. Claude couldn't help but notice the absurdity of Cain fitting in while already being a baron. Nina felt sorry and tried to hug him, but Cain bolted, like a cat avoiding commitment. Rita, meanwhile, was looking for a substitute teacher for the next day's adventure class. Claude's eyes lit up. Perfect opportunity. Next day in class, the teacher ordered all students to cast magic toward a target. Cain, ready to flex, was interrupted. The teacher forbade him from using magic at all. Claude's group watched, noting how Cain just couldn't fit in like a normal student. In the next session, adventurers were introduced to assist the students. Everyone instantly recognized them. Claude asked the class how many were adventurers. All hands went up. "Guild cards," he said, and everyone displayed theirs. Cain, of course, didn't have one, not wanting to make the others feel bad. He already had a gold card. Claude whispered, annoyed, "Take it out already." Cain mumbled that he left it at home. Claude sighed, disappointed, but told him not to forget next time. Inside the training manor, Claude announced today's lesson, Boost. Students eagerly volunteered to demonstrate, and Cain, ready to impress, waited his turn. He watched as the other students formed lines and practiced. Cain was last and worried he wouldn't reach the duel in time. But the setup was intentional. Everyone else was subtly showing off their strength. The plan? Let Cain catch up and astonish everyone with his raw power. A 700 IQ quantum Riz Zexer, if you will. Finally, Cain's turn arrived. Swords clashed, sparks flew, and then the bell rang. Cain begged for just one extra minute, but the teacher wouldn't allow it. Claude apologized, promising a future duel, but the teacher cut him off. No next time. Apparently, Cain had already blown the episode's budget by unlocking a new type of milkers. Cain, frustrated, spent the night venting, obliterating trees in a magical frenzy, basically a forest-level tantrum. A giant dragon appeared. Cain slashed it in a single stroke. A boulder blocked his path, but hundreds of fireballs rained down, creating a scene that made the guards suspect the god of destruction had been unleashed. Garm led the army to investigate, but Cain had already teleported away. Garm reached the crater only to see his emblem, reminders of Cain's chaotic escapades. Back in the king's room, the king panicked, believing the god of destruction had appeared after the forest was incinerated. Cain tried to explain, but the king demanded a quick answer. The king's frustration peaked as he realized he couldn't even come up with a witty comeback. Meanwhile, a goblin in the distance spotted a mysterious orb and promptly got eaten by a dragon. That single bite weakened the seal just enough to matter. At school, summoning magic was on the lesson plan. Cain hesitated, planning to sneak out, but the teacher allowed him to stay. No attack magic would be involved. The specialist for the day, a palace mage named Grat, explained two summoning methods: forming bonds with monsters, or summoning them from magical sigils. Since there were no wild monsters nearby, magic circles would be used. Students summoned familiars. One summoned a giant beast that rejected him for looking like Mash with a mushroom haircut. Grat chuckled, noting that at least the boy could use magic unlike Mash. Finally, Cain's turn came. He asked if it was safe to pour all his power into the summoning. Grat reassured him if the summoned entity wasn't interested, it would leave. Cain unleashed his full mana into the sigil. A blue light surged, a horrifyingly intense aura emanated. A horned man appeared, questioning why a mere human had summoned the Prince of Darkness, basically the fantasy equivalent of summoning Darth Vader by accident. Cain immediately blinded the room, unsure if this was truly the Prince of Darkness. The man cast a red flicker, revealing his identity. Cain drew his sword, ready, but the prince knelt, apologizing and pledging service as Cain's subordinate. He offered to form a summoning contract, even destroy nations with the Demon's Clan if Cain wished. Cain, deadpan, said all he wanted was mommy milkers, no nation needed to burn. Impressed, the prince, Seth, agreed to serve Cain at any time. After the prince left, Grat muttered in disbelief about the name Prince of Darkness, and Cain sighed, too powerful for a normal contract, but at least he now had an ally. They all decided to just roll with Cain's story, and he was secretly glad he'd covered it up. But of course, he was back in the fucking king's room for the 69th time. Cain swallowed and confessed. It was the Prince of Darkness. The room collectively went into cardiac arrest. The king gawked, unable to believe that Cain's ugly ass had been blessed with the power to wipe out an entire nation. Rad, new to these royal roasts, whispered, "Wait, he's allowed to talk to the king like this?" The king just muttered that Cain's time training under the first king had made him insufferably disrespectful. "Show me your status window now," he demanded. When the status popped up, everyone screamed. Cain had earned the title of demigod, and his stats were beyond measure. Grat bowed so low he practically kissed the floor, promising to roast the king alongside Cain, but Cain waved him off. "I got this." The room debated whether to start calling him master, while the king gulped. This boy could literally destroy the world. Cain chuckled. "Relax. Treat me like you always have." The king hesitated, then promised to keep roasting him as usual, but inwardly wondered if Cain could have the entire kingdom handed to him tomorrow. Finally, the king's blood pressure settled, and he grudgingly granted Cain a town. Sylvia caught wind of the news and celebrated with, "Finally, I can give you the best-made milkers," Cain groaned. "Shut the fuck up already." But Sylvia persisted, insisting he would have them whether he liked it or not. The butler intervened before her enthusiasm destroyed the room and informed Cain that Garm's town was under attack by monsters from the forest. At the town, residents were evacuating. Cain met with his brother Jim, who explained that monster activity in the forest had been growing. Some were stronger than anything they could hold off, resembling the forces that had attacked their city a decade ago. They had sent entire parties to investigate, but results were inconclusive. Large-scale deployment wasn't an option, so careful handling was required. Basically, it was like trying to herd cats with rocket launchers. Cain volunteered. Jin, understandably concerned, told him he was too young. Cain flashed his card and reminded Jin that he had defeated a red dragon alone. Jin's fear turned to pride, agreeing to let Cain help. Cain said he would first check in with the Adventurers Guild. At the guild, the new receptionist gawked, thinking they were shorthanded for hiring a kid. But when she saw his A-rank card, she screamed, "Sorry, wrong show, Ruby, wrong show again." "How do I keep messing this up?" Rudy apologized for the rookie's outburst and welcomed Cain, curious about his visit. Jim had already warned the guild the forest was dangerous and adventurers were returning gravely injured. Millie and Nina appeared, and Cain felt a rush of relief seeing them again. Nina explained the guild had called them to form a strong party to investigate the forest, and Millie added that her brother and his wife would join them soon. Drama levels, maximum. Cain told Rudy he planned to investigate alone, but she begged him to take someone. He smirked. "Of course, I have companions." In the forest, Cain summoned his 2 tsundere pets, who instantly began licking him but quickly remembered they were supposed to be serious. An ominous presence hung in the air. His search ability failed, and while slaying monsters, he sensed that something or someone was observing him. He summoned the Prince of Darkness. Seth knelt immediately. Cain asked him to investigate, and Seth confirmed the forest was crawling with an overwhelming number of unusually high-level monsters. He requested permission to summon a subordinate, which Cain granted. Seth called forth Dalamisha. Alfred, shocked, knelt before Cain instead of Batman references, but Cain snapped, "Shut the f*** up with the jokes and investigate!" Dalamisha, one of the 4 heavenly kings, specialized in reconnaissance. He opened a pit filled with cockroaches to scout, but Cain panicked and demanded he release them. Dalamisha obliged, using the insects to locate the monsters. Cain began slaughtering them with single strikes. Think you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about, but on a continental scale. Cain teleported back to town, and Millie and Nina were shocked by the sheer number of A and S rank monsters he'd taken out. Claude appeared, stunned. Cain explained they were all from the forest and warned that even stronger creatures lurked deeper inside. Valmisha's scouts reported a mysterious figure attempting to intimidate them, but Seth refused to back down. He summoned Dalamisha again for reinforcement, treating it as training to keep his old powers sharp. As they neared the source, Aaron's eyes spotted them. He unleashed thousands of monsters to attack the town. Seth teleported to Cain and confirmed the onslaught had begun. Cain ordered Rudy to alert everyone and instructed Claude to rally adventurers to hold the line. Rudy warned him it was too dangerous, but Cain reminded her he had friends stronger than most adventurers. Seth, finally realizing he had a friend for the first time in years, vowed to protect him. They raced into the forest. Tifana appeared, jumping to follow Cain, but he told her to stay and protect the town and their home. She promised, and Cain soared onward. Seth, wondering why Cain wasn't teleporting, learned that only Cain could teleport in this nation. Dalamisha single-handedly decimated dragons, and when one flanked him, a massive inferno saved the day. Cain cast wave after wave of fire, feeling the overwhelming presence emanating from the forest center. Aaron, observing from afar, announced he was waiting for the followers of the old geysers. Seth promised he would summon his underlings, but cautioned that the forest might not survive. Cain smiled and told him to be careful, but Seth countered, insisting Cain himself should watch his step. The earth shook. As the monsters surged, Seth summoned his loyal subjects, who questioned why the 4 heavenly kings had been called. Seth explained it was at the request of his only friend, Cain. The kings were shocked that Seth had formed a friendship, and Dalamisha revealed Seth had created a contract with Cain, astonishing even the 4 kings. They marveled that a mere human could wield such power to contract with the Prince of Darkness. Dalamisha confirmed Cain was the great demigod, God's chosen. Seth promised full explanations later, but for now, everyone rallied to assist Cain. Meanwhile, Cain soared above the battlefield, raining infernos down, his aura blazing across the forest as the chaos unfolded around him. But a massive purple blast shot toward Cain, but he blocked it with inferno. At last, he saw it, the black dragon. Aaron, the former god of amusement, now revived in borrowed dragon form. Aaron powered up, lamenting that only part of him had returned, and sent an onslaught of monsters toward the city, treating it all like a game. Could humans survive? Across the forest, Claude noticed people floating in the air. His wife told him to stop joking, but he muttered something about cheating on her toxic ass being funnier. Everyone realized the floating people were likely Cain's overpowered allies. Nina confirmed their suspicion. They were indeed his friends, suspiciously overleveled NPCs basically. The four heavenly kings began to struggle, but Seth urged them on, ensuring the humans had a fighting chance. Nina used her search ability, spotting that they were about to be surrounded. Millie rushed forward with Cain, cutting down beasts with precision. Cain faced Aaron directly. The god of amusement sneered, infuriated that Cain's eyes mirrored those who had sealed him long ago. He unleashed his dragon breath, and Cain narrowly evaded. Aaron attacked again, but Cain leapt back and countered with Inferno. The flames left no mark. Aaron scoffed at such weak magic. Meanwhile, Cain's friends were being overwhelmed. Claude, as usual, plotted cheating antics, while Millie impatiently anticipated giving Cain her milkers. Priority, always milkers! Aaron continued his assault, and Cain summoned Haku and Jin to fend off the dragon. They dodged its attacks, but Aaron's tail struck Haku unconscious, preparing a lethal blow. Nina depleted her magic, leaving Claude and Millie temporarily paralyzed. Just as a massive beast lunged for Claude, iron spears pierced its head. Tefana had arrived to defend the front line. She declared reinforcements were here and she would protect the front from now on. Claude vowed not to let her fight alone, true to the words of his good friend. Basically, friend zone redemption arc in action. Haku took a devastating hit, partially blocked by Jin, and Aaron prepared another fiery strike. Cain dove in, blocking it with all his might. Cue dramatic slow-motion hair flip. He activated his overload ability. Light, reminiscent of their previous encounter, erupted. Cain unleashed Saint's Sanctuary, fueled solely by the desire to protect everyone. Their attacks clashed in a blinding explosion, but Cain's willpower began to overwhelm Aaron. Ascending toward the heavens, he shouted that he would protect all their smiles, asking his mom and dad for more power. Haku and Jin tried to restrain him. Seth and Dalmatia scowled at the devastation. Cain had obliterated miles of fertile land. Cain shrugged. "I was just trying to destroy the black dragon," the others argued, saying the onslaught had already ended. The monsters had left the forest thanks to him. Landscapers everywhere collectively groaned. Claude hugged Cain, Tefana joined, and Millie embraced him tighter. Cain thought about helping people in this world, while Dalmatia mused that the god's chosen was truly remarkable. They laughed, realizing he might become one of the greatest men alive. Back in the fucking king's room, the king knew this was the finale and decided to roast Cain harder than ever. He demanded to know about the pillar of light visible from the castle, suspecting Cain's involvement. Cain explained it was meant to pierce the black dragon, but his intermediate magic wasn't enough, so he had to use royal-level magic to royally fuck the king, he clarified. The king, unprepared for a comeback, finally admitted defeat. Big oof. After all, he would be marrying his daughter anyway. The count suggested granting Cain a domain, and the king agreed. Cain humbly accepted Dorenthal, the worst town in the realm, notorious for corrupt adventurers and fleeing nobles. Tefana hugged him, moved to tears. Cain smiled, excited to rebuild it and make everyone smile. Step 1. Max out town stats. Together with his friends, he set off to reconstruct the domain. Guards recognized his rank immediately, and even the clapped king asked his messenger what had happened. At the guild, a welcome party awaited, but Cain swiftly handled the festivities with his fire powers. In the tavern, he rescued a mistreated cat girl, showing the men who the real pussies were, kicking them into chaotic positions. Seth screamed for help. His wife had learned of his cheating and kicked him out. Lithone, his demon wife, appeared. A new type of milker was unlocked, demon milkers. Cain introduced himself, criticizing Seth for cheating on such an unparalleled beauty. Lithone, impressed, wanted to join his harem. Seth departed, never to be seen again. Plot twist, Karma is a demon. Cain stormed the church and uncovered a cult controlling the city, subduing them effortlessly. He built a massive wall around the city. Zenom applauded, noting how many more tasks remained. Tefana and the girls were shocked by the enormous castle Cain erected, bigger than the king's, but Cain laughed, confident he was bigger than the king in more ways than one. Why did Cain go to such lengths? Because he reincarnated with all past memories, became an off-the-charts noble with level 10 protections, and wanted to protect everyone. But that story, as always, was for next time. His friends were annoyed, especially Sylvia, who still hadn't given him maid milkers, but Cain apologized, smiling. Thank you all for watching this video. If you liked it, please subscribe and leave your suggestions. Till next time.